David is getting closer to allegedly being charged with murder. His preliminary hearing started on July 21st, and so much was discovered and said. Messages between Celeste and David shows that Celeste was actually pregnant, and then later on got an abortion at just 13 years old. So David's starting to look very guilty in this hearing. Now, we finally find out on July 27th, which was the last day of the preliminary hearing, the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to hold David and proceed to trial on the charges of first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14 years old, unlawful mutilation of human remains. So David, to this day, remains in prison with no bail. So it looks like David is not gonna get away with this one. So let's get into the story of Celeste Rivas Hernandez and what really happened in this relationship with David Burke. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. This episode contains discussion of sensitive topics that may be distressing for some audiences. Please take care while listening, and if these topics are triggering for you, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Welcome to Taste of Tea podcast. My name is Teresa, and if you are new here, we talk about true crime. So if you're interested in true crime, please subscribe, like, comment, and if you want to watch more about true crime, please watch my previous episodes. Okay, so I've done, I think, about 2 or 3. I think 2. I'm not sure. Episodes about Celeste Rivas Hernandez and the story with David Burke. Now, if you haven't watched those videos, please, stop here, come back, but watch those videos first because I go more in depth into the story of Celeste Rivas Hernandez and how she met David Burke and the whole situation between their relationship and everything like that. So if you want to get that backstory before you watch this one, because we're about to continue on with the story because there's a lot more that happened behind doors, please do so. I am going to say a summary of the story and basically a rundown of why David is in this position right now. So David Anthony Burke is his full name. He is a 21-year-old singer, or was. He met this girl named Celeste Rivas Hernandez online when she was 11 years old and he was 16, I believe. They started having a sexual relationship when she turned 13 and David was 18. This was around, I think, November of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. But WTF, what is an 18-year-old doing with a 13-year-old? I don't know, that's kind of weird to me. But I digress. Let's continue. On September 8th of 2025, there was a body found in a Tesla that was tracked to be David Burke's Tesla. And a few days later, they find out that it's Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body that was found in this Tesla that is connected to David Burke. To find that out, it's so crazy. A lot of people didn't expect it, obviously. It's something that came out of nowhere, literally, for certain people. So this Tesla was in a tow yard area, and a worker from that tow yard found the body by smelling this odor coming from this Tesla, and he immediately called the police, and the police arrived and they found this body. Now this body was found in 2 bags. It was dismembered, and in the first bag they found a head, Celeste's head. Now that we know that it was her, Celeste's head and her torso. In the second bag, they found her limbs. So they found her arms and legs. I think from what I read, she still had her leggings on. There was also missing fingers. It seems like her ring finger was missing, which Celeste had on her ring finger a tattoo of David's name. And then she also had another tattoo that said shh, which matched David's tattoo. And I think that was on her index finger. Her pinky is also missing. Now, it was very confusing on what fingers were missing, but from what I was finding, it was her ring finger and her pinky that was missing. I don't know why her pinky. I would assume her index finger, but there's things that say that one finger was missing, which was the David finger, or two fingers that were missing were the ring finger and the pinky, or three, which was the index, the pinky, and the ring finger. Now, like I said, I don't know if all of that is true, but fingers were missing. I know that. And I'm pretty sure her ring finger was one of them. Obviously, as soon as David's name appeared to be connected to the Tesla, they immediately decided to go and search him, and they found a lot of stuff. Now, we're going to get into the things that they found, but long story short, he gets arrested. Now, it takes a little bit longer for David to get arrested, about maybe, I think, 6 to 8 months. And a lot of people were upset about it at that time because they were like, obviously he did it, just arrest him already. But the problem is that they need to find enough evidence to be able to be like, okay, yes, he did it, like for sure he did it. Because if they take this to trial and they don't have enough evidence, they could possibly look bad, and David could go away, like an innocent man, quote unquote, because they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he was the cause of this murder, allegedly. So he gets arrested on April 16th, 2026. We just witnessed the preliminary hearing that started on July 21st and ended on the 27th, which was not too long ago, okay? And it really made David look super guilty with all the evidence that the police found. So thankfully, the police was able to find such great hard evidence to prove that David could have possibly been the cause of this murder. So now let's get into the preliminary hearing and what was being said in this hearing to make the judge decide that they can move on to a trial because they have enough evidence to be able to charge him for the charges that he is being charged for. Let's first talk about what a preliminary hearing is. So if you don't know what a preliminary hearing, that freaking word is hard to say. I struggled with that word a lot. But the preliminary hearing is basically a hearing. It's not the trial, okay? There is not a jury involved or present. It's just the judge, the attorneys, the prosecutors, and the defenders. And then the family comes also to listen. Now, this preliminary hearing, the judge decides on whether it could be moved on, or there is enough evidence to be moved on to the next step, which is the trial. In this hearing, prosecutors need to prove that David is guilty for the murder. They didn't allow cameras in this preliminary hearing, but they did allow what is it called? Journalists or people in that sense that would write. They would allow them to bring in their laptops to type notes and stuff like that about the case. Obviously, there was also sketchers. There was also people that were sketching inside the courthouse. So we have that little information from them. So on day one, which was Tuesday, the 21st, 2026 of July, they focused on the discovery of the body and the initial investigation. So they brought in David. The energy in the room, from what people were saying, that it was very stated that it was very unsettling. It felt really awkward, weird, just the energy was just off. Okay. David and his lawyers allegedly were oddly upbeat, which means they were allegedly whispering, smirking, and showing little emotion. But this is what people were stating when the people that were in the courthouse on that day, they stated that this was how they looked. They looked like they were unbothered. David looked like he was unbothered by all the things that they were stating about Celeste and her body and how she was found. Which is crazy because if he allegedly, murdered Celeste, the fact that you don't have any empathy and had this relationship with her, like, that's psycho of you. That's really psycho. That's not normal. Because usually as a human being, you feel all these emotions and you feel regret or you feel guilt or all these things because you know that you did it, but there's a lot of signs that he did it. So I don't know, it's so weird to me. Let's continue. Celeste's family was present in the hearing, and mostly people recognized them that day or that first day, because obviously seeing their family there and knowing that they're about to hear all this information is just heartbreaking. A few people stated that Celeste's family looked devastated, especially her mother. And she broke down when she heard Celeste's full name um, being read out loud in the courthouse. I don't know how I would feel if I was Celeste's mother hearing my daughter's name read out loud in the courthouse, knowing what's about to come and knowing all the information that I'm about to find out. I think I would just I don't know. I don't think I would be able to be present. But they were definitely present for the most part. There was some times where they were not present when it was graphic or certain things like that. For the most part, they were present and they listened to everything and saw everything, all the pictures and videos that they provided or presented in this hearing. Moving forward, okay, there's going to be graphic details moving forward. I'm just warning you right now. Um, so viewer discretion is advised. There's a lot of things that I'm going to be saying that just it feels wrong. This whole entire situation case is just wrong. And I am going to say a lot of graphic things. So I just want to warn you now. Um, please be safe. I don't want this to be a trigger for anybody or even make you feel a lot of emotions, because for me, I know when I was reading this, I felt just overwhelmed with all the information that I found out. Obviously, we already knew a lot of it, but just going in depth and finding out a little bit more about how this all went down and what happened is just, it's a lot. So, just warning you right now. The crime scene experts explained that the condition of Celeste's body was so deteriorated that insects had completed full life cycles. Insects were already growing out of the body and eating the flesh. So heartbreaking. Investigators found extensive blood in the car and in David's garage. Strong odors, larvae, and blue fragments embedded in the remains of her body. Now, we will find out later what this blue fragments that's embedded in her body, in her cuts. We find out later what that was and where it came from. The only way to identify Celeste's body was through her dental records. So her body was so deteriorated, her body was so badly decomposed that it was hard to identify who it was. You weren't able to recognize her. basically. We already talked about this in the beginning, in the summary, that there was 2 bags. The first one had her head and her torso. And the second bag had her dismembered arms and legs. Her ring and her pinky finger on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla. And like I stated, the ring finger is the one that had the tattoo, David's name tattooed on it. The Tesla was abandoned for weeks before being impounded, and the evidence inside showed attempts to clean, conceal, and sanitize. So they did provide pictures. They did provide certain evidence to show that this was a probability. Body cam video from February 2024 played the welfare check, which this welfare check, I cannot say that word. This welfare check was done at David's home. So David, obviously David tries to play it off cool, and he was like trying to offer or tell the police that there was alcohol in the refrigerator and if they wanted a beer. I think he was 20 years old or 21. He was like 20 years old at this point. But yeah, he was joking around with the deputies, and he was telling them like, oh yeah, I have beer in the refrigerator, do you want a beer or something like that. Like, he was just trying to act like cool, trying to make them, I don't know, I guess his friend for whatever reason. Like, that off the bat just sounds guilty. The deputies ask David about Celeste, and David tells the deputies that he only met Celeste once and thought she was 18. So she had supposedly told David that she was 18 years old and didn't know that she was a minor. Didn't know that she was 13. And also didn't know that she was missing. So at this time, this is the moment when Celeste ran away from her home, and her parents obviously reported her missing. Obviously, the parents of Celeste knew that Celeste was dating David, which is another story, okay? This is another thing that a lot of people have been talking about that just doesn't sit right with a lot of people and doesn't sit right with me personally. Because it's like, that's your daughter. I know that she's 13. She technically cannot make her own decisions at this point. When it comes to those type of things, like, this is where discipline needs to play a part. This is where you need to, teach your kids different morals and values. Like, it's a lot of things. Everybody teaches their kids different morals and values, or different, lifestyles, or whatever it is. We cannot judge on how a person decides to raise their kids. All we can do is basically state our own opinion and say what we could have done in the situation. But I mean, everybody has their own, ways on how they want to raise their kids. But there's a lot of people talking about the situation, why the parents of Celeste Rivas, why they let her date David. David also stated on this welfare check that he only met Celeste once, like I said, on November 2003, which is crazy because November 2003 was the day that they had possibly, from what we found out, that was a time when they began their sexual relationship. When Celeste was 13 years old and David was 18. Now, at this point, it's February 2024. David also shows the deputies a picture of Celeste on his phone, which weird. But he shows this picture, and he stated that he thought that she was 18. And this picture is literally her middle school picture. And she does not look 18. At least not to me. At least not to many people. Her middle school yearbook picture. I think it was like 6th grade. It's so shocking to me. So he believes that she's 18, quote unquote, and that's what happened at the welfare check. There was nothing else that we know, at least. On this day, on the 21st of July, they also stated David's purchased history. We find out that he ends up purchasing a shovel, 2 chainsaws, body bags, inflatable pool, and a burn cage ordered under alliances after April 23rd, 2025. Allegedly, Celeste was murdered on April 23rd, 2025. So after this point, he started ordering all these things. Now we're going to get into in depth of when he ordered them and from where and what name he used to order these items. So he ordered a shovel from Home Depot, and it was delivered to his home from Postmates, purchased on April 24th, 2025. He also purchased 2 chainsaws on May 1st, 2025 on Amazon. On May 25th, he ordered off of Amazon a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool in his home. On July 7th, he ordered from Amazon a burn cage. He made all these purchases under a fake name, Victoria Mendez. I go more in depth as to like the time frames of all these purchases and where he was a little bit later. And I forgot to mention, but we are going to do multiple parts on this because there's a lot of information that comes out. So in part 3, I will go more in depth of where David was when these purchases were made and like the timeline of everything and how it all fits in place. So just look out for part 3 for that. But we're going to continue on with the preliminary hearing. So this is still the first day, okay? This is everything that's being said on the first day. On April 23rd, 2025, Celeste was invited to David's home in Hollywood Hills a day after their argument about Celeste wanting to ruin his career. There were Uber evidence, so Uber receipts, of that David ordered Celeste's Uber to his home. There were multiple stab wounds on her body, on Celeste's body. He allegedly allowed her to bleed out, dismembered her body, and tried to hide it. They showed evidence to the dismembered body. They showed pictures of her dismembered body. They showed proof of his purchases to basically prove that he was trying to hide it. And they showed blood spots in his garage showing that she was bleeding out. And obviously the biopsy shows that she bled out and there was a lot of stab wounds, and that was the cause of her death. Supposedly there was 2 stabs that was like either it was a main artery that he got, and that's what kind of like, she bled out. David on this day pled not guilty to murder, not guilty to continuous sexual abuse of a child, not guilty to unlawful mutilation of human remains. We're going to move on to day 2. Day 2 was on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. The defense side stated that the prosecutors are asking the court to make assumptions rather than relying on direct proof that David killed Celeste. And it doesn't make sense because they did show a lot of proof. They showed receipts, they showed pictures, they showed proof. At the end of the day, there was proof for the purchases. How can you explain the purchases? Which they did state that buying an item is not proof it was used in a crime, which, okay, maybe. But why the hell do you need a burn cage? What you need that for? Why you need a big body bag? And why all of a sudden you need 2 chainsaws? Not 1, 2. That's weird. They also stated Defense side also stated that a timeline is not proof of murder, and prosecutors still must connect David directly to the alleged acts. The prosecutors, during this whole hearing, they focused on David allegedly killing Celeste to protect a music career worth millions of dollars. So at this time, he was becoming huge. He was big. He was already performing at Coachella. Now, he started in 2022 with his music career. And already in 2023, he was already being signed with such big people, and he was making music with a lot of big people like SZA and a bunch of others. And it was just crazy. And then just recently, like before he even was arrested, Justin Bieber followed him. Like that's not like huge, but that's just showing how big this person, or how big David was getting in the music career. And it kind of makes sense because the fight that Celeste and David had the day before he was murdered, or the day before she was murdered, allegedly, it was about her ending his career, about her releasing all this information about him and trying to end his career. And obviously, it makes sense because his career was hitting off. He was just a 20-year-old, like making bank, making more than a lot of people at 20 years old. There was evidence regarding contracts and projecting earnings and career opportunities that showed that he was big, like I was stating. The defense attacked that narrative by arguing that the state is speculating about motive, which the state is the prosecutors. Future earnings projections do not prove murder. Financial success does not automatically establish criminal intent. Maybe not, but it leads to it and it makes sense. It makes total sense as to why this could be one of the reasons, or as to why this could be the main reason David allegedly murdered Celeste. Now let's get into the purchase timeline evidence that was shown, okay? There was receipts of the shovel, there was receipts of the chainsaws, inflatable pool, the body bag that was labeled City Morgue. What the hell do you need that for? Can you explain that? Like, what do you need that for? I could see how the defense could use this as in a way of like, oh, he was probably, doing it for a music video. Okay. Because I think there was a talk of that being a possibility. I could see how these purchases could be taken lightly because we don't know. These items do not prove that he is a murderer. But something in this hearing proved that he could possibly be a murderer because the judge was the one to decide that we're moving forward because there's enough evidence. That was the end of day 2. Day 3, which was Thursday, July 23rd, 2026. On this day, they focused on the forensic evidence, crime scene processing, and defense attacks on investigation itself. LAPD criminalist Lauren Wallace testified regarding search of David's Hollywood Hills property conducted after Celeste's remains were identified. These were the items that were tested: garage floor mats, a rowing machine, Tesla charging cord, tarps, black trash bag, wipies located inside a trash bag. Wallace explained that Blue Star is used to detect blood that may not be visible to the naked eye. These items were tested positive for blood. Investigators testified that 2 chainsaws were recovered from the garage, and a 3rd mini saw was recovered inside the residence, which there's rumors stating that it's missing. that this mini saw is missing and was not tested for blood for whatever reason. Now, supposedly the two chainsaws were not turned in to get tested for any DNA because they were tested for phenolphthalein, something like that. Okay. And it came back negative. But basically, that is a synthetic chemical compound primarily used as a acidic base, pH indicator, and analytical tool. It basically tests for blood, and it came back negative. Wallace says not everything collected gets tested, and this is discussed with investigators, which they state that it's physically impossible to test every single item because there's just so many items. But it's like, why wouldn't you test all of them? Like, this is a crime. This is a crime scene. You gotta test every single item you find. But I don't know. I'm not in this, industry, so I don't know, how it all goes, but it would only make sense to test every single item because it's a crime scene. You're investigating this crime scene, But anyways, let's continue. They found jugs of fake blood in his garage and also didn't log this for evidence. Now, this could have been some sort of something for his music video or whatever, but still, like, that could have been something, Wallace said that she didn't see a burn cage because she wasn't instructed to search in certain places of the house. So the burn cage was not found by her, but it was found by someone else. And this picture of the burn cage, which was still in the box, was shown. Another criminalist testified regarding blue inflatable pool previously discussed earlier in testimony. So David orders this inflatable pool, and it had multiple tears. The tears appeared consistent with the damage from a sharp object rather than ordinary wear and tear. Witness also testified that the blue fragments recovered in Celeste's body in her cuts matched the material of the inflatable pool, which they found out by putting the pieces that they found in Celeste's cuts or body, putting the pieces in the holes, basically putting them together as a puzzle. So, yeah, kind of like putting it in the holes of the inflatable pool that it already had, and it fit like a puzzle. Investigators testified they found approximately 11 air fresheners in his Tesla, maggots and dead flies associated with decomposition from her body, red stains that was tested for blood on his car, in his garage, in multiple spots. Another witness testified regarding the discovery of Celeste's passport along Highway 154 in Santa Barbara County. Now, we talk about this later on in the timeline in part 3. But Santa Barbara comes up a lot, and David visited this place multiple times. And the fact that a witness found Celeste's passport in the same location that David visited multiple times, which was super far, which was like an hour and 40 minutes away from his house. But yeah, so he visited this place multiple times in the night, and her passport was found in this location. The defense attorney pointed out that the passport was handled with bare hands, so it can't be used as like evidence for whatever reason. But yeah, so that's what they reported. The passport was reportedly never dusted for fingerprints. Defense appeared to use this evidence to challenge investigative procedures and the reliability of conclusions drawn from recovered evidence. So, yeah. The passport, they're stating that the passport cannot be used for evidence because, one, it wasn't dusted for fingerprints and it was handled with bare hands. The defense's goal on this day was to convince the judge that the prosecutors are filling gaps with assumptions rather than hard proof evidence. That's what they're saying, right? But we already know the answer. we already know how we get to this point, or where do we get to this point. Okay, so that's part 1. I only talked about 3 days because it's just a lot of information to put in one video. I'm going to split the other 2 days into the second part. And then the third part is going to be about the timeline of how everything fits in, and throughout the time that, Celeste was dead and David was still moving on with his life, but doing things that kind of seemed like he was giving hints. Okay. But we're going to get into that in part 3. But I hope you guys enjoyed this first part. Let me know if there's anything that I missed in the first 2 days, if you guys know any other information, because I really try to do my research here. There was a lot of information out there. There was a lot of mixed things that happened in the first days. So, I mean, there's a possibility I could have something wrong here. But this is what we know from whoever was in the actual hearing. This is what we know, because we weren't able to listen in. They weren't able to have cameras. It basically is he said, she said thing situation, because nothing has been released officially. But like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for part 2, because I finished the preliminary hearing and I talk about a little bit more details of the messages that went down between David and Celeste, and how he found out that Celeste was pregnant and has an abortion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you in part 2. Okay, bye.